G'day everybody and welcome to a full flight tutorial in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So welcome to Sydney Airport. We're at gate 55 as you can see on the screen in front of us, and the aircraft is in a cold and dark state with ground power available. So the first thing that you want to do in every flight is obviously have a flight plan. Now you obviously need a flight plan to get from point A to point B and have all the relevant weight information for your flight. So in today's video, we're going to be departing from Sydney and we're going to be arriving in Melbourne. So at the top here, we're going to start with the flight information and fill out this information here. So airline, we're going to do QFA. We're obviously flying Qantas. 69 is my favorite number for no apparent reason. And then we're going to move down to our aircraft info. Aircraft type is Boeing 737-800. So we're going to go down here and select that. Variant or airframe, you don't have to actually choose. So I'm just going to leave that. Cost index, we'll leave that to be auto. Fuel factor, I don't worry about any of this sort of stuff. I'll scroll on down though, and when it says selections, the OFP layout is operational flight plan, I believe. So I've got to change that to LIDO or LIDO. And the reason I changed that is because it's just easier to read, I believe. And I think it's pretty similar to what they use in real life. Units, we want to leave to kilograms or wherever your units are. If you use kilos or pounds, you can obviously go ahead and change that. Flight maps, detailed, leave it that. Flight rules is obviously instrument flight rules because we're flying a 737 and doesn't matter about the rest of these inputs. Everything else is pretty much handled for us. Optional entries, scheduled block time is going to say that it's going to be about an hour and 45 minutes from sort of start to finish. But that's not how long the flight's going to take. That does include taxiing and stuff like that. Okay, so everything's all sweet. Cool. So you can scroll back up here and then click Generate Flight, and the magic is going to be all done for us. There we go. All right, it's given us all the info we need. We've got initial altitude, which is our cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. We've got our fuel that we need in order to get there safely. So we've got how much fuel we're going to be burning, how many passengers we've got. We've got all our takeoff weights and landing weights and payload, all that stuff. It's all going to make sense when we move over to the FMC in the 737 and input it all into that, which we're going to go ahead and do just now. So the plane is still cold and dark. So we're going to go ahead and start getting power to the cockpit and to the plane. So to do this, we're going to go up to our overhead panel like so, and we want to enable our ground power. As you can see, the plane is now starting to get a few lights and exciting things like that. And we're going to stay on this overhead panel, and we're going to turn on the battery by clicking that switch there. We're going to arm the emergency lights, the emergency exit lights, which is all good there. And then we're going to go ahead. I'm just going to zoom in here. The front of this panel, it says APU. That's your auxiliary power unit. We want to turn that on as soon as we can. Therefore, we can get off the ground power as soon as we can. And then the rampies would essentially get rid of the ground power, and pretty much we're on our own in terms of power supply. So in order to do this, all you need to do is come down to the APU and hold that to the start position. And once you hold it down to the start position for a couple of seconds, it'll release itself, and then this low oil pressure light will come on, and the needle will start moving, and the engine gas temperature, I believe that stands for, it'll start to get hotter, which is what you want. That means that the APU is turning on. And if we go to the outside view, and you can hear that nice whistle sound of the APU starting up. Awesome. So that's a good way to check. And another way to check is that these lights are now on. So that's saying to us you can now use your APU generators, which we're going to go ahead and do by flicking the middle ones here, 1 and 2. And now essentially ground power can be disconnected. Another thing you want to go and do as soon as you possibly can is go back to the overhead panel, but you want to go a bit further back this time up to this rear panel here, and this is your IRS system. Now the IRS system essentially tells your airplane where you are. Okay, so when it's off, it doesn't really know where we are in the world. You want to select both of these to the align position. Now depending on your settings, the time it takes to align the IRS will vary. My settings on my FMC down here, I believe, I've changed in the past to be not realistic time because it takes too long. And to change the time it takes to align, you want to go to PMDG Setup, options, simulation, IRS options, and it says alignment time, realistic, fast, or instant. And you can see it's telling us to now enter our IRS position, which we're going to go ahead and do by clicking FMC. If you do get a message down here on your FMC saying nav data out of date, don't stress too much about that. Just click clear. Okay, so there you go. Enter IRS position. Now to do so, you want to click pause in it. See these boxes here? If you ever get a option with boxes like this, it's almost saying to you, I need some information in these boxes. Our ref airport is where we currently are, which is Sydney, and ICAO curve of Sydney is YSSY, so we're going to hit that in there. And then what we can do, that's going to send out the coordinates of Sydney Airport. We're going to click that to copy those coordinates and drop it in the box here. And the IRS will, align us to those coordinates. Now, with the IRS position filled out, you want to go back to the overhead panel here and change these switches to nav. And now when you go back to your default position, you'll notice you've got some information on your screens down here. You've got a map. So that means your plane knows, I guess, where you are in the world. Let's go and find the index button and click the pause button and then click route button. And this is going to be our route that we've got on Simbrief. So origin is YSSY. The dest is obviously where we're landing at, which is Melbourne, YMML. And the runway is the runway that you're taking off from today. Now, that's going to be determined by yourself, or if you're using an air traffic control system, they'll tell you which runway to use. But on Simbrief as well, it does have the up-to-date current live runways that they're using in real time. And apparently, according to Simbrief now, they're using 16 right. So let's go 16 right and then put that into runway. Alrighty, now it's time to put in our waypoints, our airways, and all that good stuff. So to do that, we can go to the DEP Arrive button. And now we want to start, obviously, from where we are to where we are going. So departure is Sydney. So we're going to hit the DEP button over the Sydney. We've got the runway 16 right locked in here. And we're going to ignore the SID. We're not using a SID today. It actually says on our flight plan to go direct to TESAT. So let's go route. And we're going to go direct to TESAT, and it's going to go in that first box up here. Okay, so now we're going from Sydney, runway 16 right, direct to TESAT. And from TESAT, we want to hit Victor 169, which would be an airway. So with the airways, you need to always put that in the via section. So we're going to put that there. And then it's going to give us those boxes to fill out. And we want to go to PEGSU, PEGSU. Put that in there as a waypoint, and after that we want to hit up Victor 20. So we're going to go Victor 20, put that in the airway section, and then from Victor 20 we want to go to Temis, so TEMIS, and we want to put that in these boxes here, and then from Temis we want Victor 169. Put that on the left-hand side, and then we're going to the ML, which is Melbourne. I believe that's a NDB or something like that. It's going to get us pretty much in the vicinity of Melbourne Airport. And then we'll put that there. And then once we get to ML, that is where we're going to have to speak to air traffic control. In real life, they would then pretty much vector you in. So they just give you, steps on where to go from ML. So we need to go ahead now and click execute. Okay. Now, we want to hit departure and arrivals button again, and want to tell the plane which actual runway we're going to be landing on. And according to Simbrief, it wants us to land on runway 16. Now, lucky for us, that's an ILS approach. So we're going to hit up ILS Y16 and hit execute. We're not going to worry about stars and stuff like that. That's standard arrival, I believe it is. Yeah, we're not going to worry about that stuff. And to see if this works, what you want to do is actually go back to your legs page. That's going to show every single waypoint and stuff like that you're going to be following. And you want to get rid of these route discontinuities. Now, to do so, you just want to replace the bottom waypoint with that box, hit execute, and that's going to get rid of that route discontinuity. Now, to make sure that you've done everything okay, what you want to do is go back to your default view, zoom in on your screen down here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just hide my yoke by clicking that, and it's just going to duck it down. And then what you want to do is go through and step through all of your waypoints. So to do so, you want to come up to your panel up here, change this from map to plan, and I'm just going to go to about 20, that's fine. And then you see this button on the FMC that says step. We're going to hit that just to make sure. So I'm going to zoom out even further to about 80, I'd say is good. And we're going to step through all of our waypoints. Got your top of climb there. And then you've got your top of descent. And then as you can see, if we zoom in, we're hovering over Melbourne Airport right now. And that ML waypoint or NDB that I said before, I mentioned that was like right over the top of Melbourne Airport. That is that star right there, which you can see. Obviously, you're not going to fly over the airport and do a sharp right-hand turn and then come back into the runway here, which is that dotted line. What would happen is you would get obviously vectored by air traffic control probably around this point here, and they'd say, QF 69, turn right, heading whatever, just to intercept this, and then you'd obviously get told from Belter what to do from there. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete ML, because we're not going to use any air traffic control. So we want to go back down to our FMC, and we want to delete ML. So what we want to do is replace ML with Belter, okay? So we're going to hit Belter, and then drag it up here, and then hit execute. Now we're going to go back to our view up here, where we're going to step through again, hit step, and get back to where we were before we deleted ML. Now you can see we're going direct to Belter and then straight in. So it just makes a little bit more sense. It is a flight simulator at the end of the day, so if you don't want to rely on ATC and stuff like that, you can just do little things like that to make your flight a little bit smoother. Okay, so that's our route all done. So let's go back down to our FMC, and we want to go into init ref. These boxes here are very important. Fuel, balance, weight, all those inputs need to go in here. And as confusing as this looks, it's nothing to be scared of, because we've got Simbrief with all the information on there for us. But we need to know how much fuel we're actually going to have on board first in order to get an accurate reading. So if we head over to our Simbrief load sheet, we can actually see block fuel says 7,165 kilograms. Now, block fuel is the amount of fuel you need in order to get from pushback to landing and then taxi to the gate that you're required to get to, plus a few contingencies or reserves, just in case anything does go wrong. You ever wonder how the pilots have enough fuel when they have to circle in the air for an extra half an hour? That's because they always allow, I think it's about 20 to 30, maybe even longer minutes of fuel, just in case they run into any issues up in the air. So we've got a block fuel of 7,165 kilos. Now, on the PMDG 737, in order to load up 7,165 kilos of fuel, you actually want to go back to the menu, go FS Actions, go to the Fuel button, and here we have how many kilograms of fuel we have on board. So we're going to type in 7,165 for this example, and hit that up there. So let's go back to our init ref page. With our zero fuel weight on the load sheet, it says EZFW, which is estimated zero fuel weight, 54,097. So that's just changed automatically to 54.1, which is fair enough because you'd round that up. Reserves, I always just sort of click 1 in there. Cost index, that is under the flight plan summary page of your flight plan next to your cruising altitude, and it says CI9. So put 9 in there, and the cruising altitude for today's flight is 36,000 feet, or flight level 360. Now, please, once you've filled out these parameters, make sure you click execute. Okay, so now that's been executed, we're going to go N1 limit. I don't worry about anything here. We'll go takeoff. Now we've got another box here that's telling us to fill in information. Now, we usually go flaps 5 for a 737 takeoff, so we're going to input that. Now, we need our center of gravity percentage for our trim to pop up. Now, in order to do that, we're going to click this button here, and it's going to calculate it for us automatically, which is 25.7. Input that there, and it's given us a trim of 4.36. With that information, we want to scroll down into our trim, over to our trim area here, and we want this to be at about 4.36, which it pretty much is now. It's at 4. So I'm just going to leave that. And now you can see we've got our V speeds here waiting for us to input in these dotted lines. To do so, you just want to hit these buttons and it'll do it for you. And that is all pretty much done. So we've got a V1 speed of 131. Our rotate speed's very soon after at 133. And that is all pretty good to go. So the FMC is set up. That's your whole flight done pretty much. And you want to go back to the overhead panel and just get everything ready to go before we can leave. So to do that, let's just go ahead. Now, this is no flow or no checklist being followed on this. It's just how I do it. It seems to work for me. So if it works for me, it should work for you. So the fuel pumps we're going to start with, we've got the left and right fuel pumps. We'll turn them on. We'll go ahead and turn on the window heat up the top here so we don't freeze up. The probes can come on. We're going to turn up the hydraulic pumps on, and we're going to hit APU bleed to on. Leave the packs off because we're about to turn the engines on, and the packs can't be on while the engines are trying to boot up. Our flight altitude, that's your cruising altitude, plus I think they usually then do about 1,000 feet on top of that, I think. And we're just going to land altitude 100. And then we're pretty much, we can go ahead and hit yaw damper as well. And we're pretty much ready to go. You probably noticed I didn't turn the center fuel pumps on for my over here on this panel. That's because we don't need the center fuel pumps. As you can see down here, we've only got fuel in the left and the right tanks today because it's such a short flight. Alrighty, now, autopilot. Let's set up this panel up here, ready to go. First things first, FD on, which is flight director. And we can also arm our auto throttle. We can change our speed knob here to about 240 unless otherwise indicated from air traffic control. But there is a rule where we don't want to be flying faster than 250 knots under 10,000 feet. And that FMC that you set up before should have all of those constraints pretty much locked in anyway. And you can tell if it's got the constraints locked in by these, I guess, pink highlighted numbers. So when we get to Belter at the other end near Melbourne, we need to be at 185 knots or below, and we need to be at 3,000 feet or above. Okay, so the plane will know that, and the plane should put itself in a position to be able to meet those constraints. Now, if you want to find what constraints you have for a departure, you'd obviously have to look up the charts. Now, again, that's probably another whole other video because charts can be confusing, especially if you're just starting out. So for now, we're not going to worry about any of those constraints. All we're going to ask our plane to do is take off and head to our cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. So we're going to go ahead and just slide this on up to there, like so. And we'll just change our heading bug here to our runway heading, which will be about 160. So one other thing you want to find out is the QNH. Now the QNH is, I believe, is the air pressure around you, I think. And this changes with the weather. So a hotter day, the QNH changes compared to a cooler day. I generally go onto my electronic flight bag and click request data from Simbrief, and it should link to your Simbrief account. And you want to hit weather. Now hit departure, and that Q1011 is the QNH. And what is that actually on your screens? Well, see this to 992 inches. We want to change that to hectopascals. Now, that's just the unit that we use in Australia. And to change that from inches to hectopascals, you want to go up to this barrow knob up here, click the outer button, and you'll see that's now swapped to 1013 hectopascals. So if I go back and hit it again, it's going back to inches and hectopascals. So essentially, if we then get up here to this knob again and scroll to down to 1011, and if you were to then click the outer button again to change it back to inches, 2985 inches is the same as 1011 hectopascals. We're pretty much ready to get pushback clearance from air traffic control, or if you're like me and you're just playing on your own and you don't have to worry about air traffic, you're pretty much ready to do it yourself. So to do so, you want to go menu, FS actions, ground services, and then remove chocks. Okay, now it's time to get pushed back. Let's go menu, FS actions, pushback. And we can change our pushback to straight out or standard right. Turn nose. We want to turn the nose. Let's see. We want to turn our nose left. Okay, we want to face our tail obviously wants to be towards the terminal there, so the nose will have to go left, standard left. All right, and click select tug, and when you click select tug, it'll actually just pop up at the front of your plane. Now we can click start.
Hello, below.
And they will talk to the below pushback drivers.
Beacons on, brakes released, clear to push, tail right.
It did say beacons on and brakes released. However, the brakes aren't released, so we're going to go and do that, which is just done now.
Brakes released.
And we're off. So the pushback has just started. And just quickly, how sick is that indigenous livery? Okay, so obviously pushback's being done. This is where you start your engines. Now, what you want to do is go up to our overhead panel, and we want the engine start section of the panel, and we'll go ignition right, and then flick this switch left to ground, and then we want to monitor this screen down here. So as you can see, this little circle up here is our N2. Now that's going to climb and climb and climb. And when that hits around about 21, which is now, we're just going to go down to this cutoff lever, which is engine 2, and click it. And that actually introduces fuel to the engine. And you can see our left engine, which is engine 2, is now booting up. You can tell you've had a good engine start when the switch actually flicks back to off automatically. And we can change this to the left, go ground, and we can start engine number 1. Again, monitor the N2 number here. When that gets to about 21, we'll introduce the fuel. About now, introduce fuel, click that. And then we'll monitor up here over the overhead panel. I'll just change the view so it's a bit easier. And you'll see this will flick back to the off position automatically once we have a good engine start. Like so. Awesome. Okay, so we had 2 good engine starts. Now what we want to do, you know how before we used our APU generators, now we actually want to transfer that to our engine generators so we can turn our APU off. So to do so, you just want to hit the outside 2 generator buttons. And now the plane is running on the engines, which is producing power. So we can turn APU off by doing that. We can go ahead and put our APU bleed off. Our packs can come to auto, and our lights can all come on. I'm just going to flick them all on now. And our taxi light can come on. This is where you would get taxi clearance. But because we're loners, we're not talking to anyone today. We're doing it ourselves. So our taxi clearance is being done, and then we want to change our flaps to flaps 5. So you can see the flaps are now coming down to configuration 5. All right, so now we want to taxi to runway 16 right. So let's take off our parking brakes, and we're off. One other thing you want to do is go to our anti-skid and put it onto RTO. Now that's for a rejected takeoff. So now the fun part is taxiing to the runway. Now I'm just going to speed this up so you don't have to sit here and listen to my voice any longer than you need to. So I'll see you when we're just about to enter runway 16 right for our departure. Alrighty, and welcome back. So we are just about to turn onto runway 16 right. Let's say, hypothetically, we've had takeoff clearance from air traffic, so we're going to turn on our lights, and we're pretty much ready to go. So once we roll on into 16 right, we'll just stop very quickly, and I'll show you what button you need to click in order to take off correctly so that you can actually activate the toga switch, which is takeoff go around. All right, and let's just stop here once we're lined up. And we've got a UPS 747 behind us, so we don't want to take up too much time or else I'll get a bit angry. Alrighty, so we're stopped here. Now the takeoff button that you want to click is this one here, auto takeoff and go around. So you can click that. I've actually got that button on my Thrustmaster throttle, so I don't need to click that, but if you don't have one, then that's what you'll be clicking. So let's go ahead and introduce some power to the throttles, and then you guys can click that black button, and you can see that it's pulled the throttle up all the way for takeoff. And let's take off from Sydney Airport, runway 16, 80 knots. All right, we're coming up to V1 very quickly. So we'll start on the rotate now. Very good. And positive rate, so the gear can come up by hitting the G button on your keyboard, or you can pull it up with that lever. And now the FD that we put on, the flight director, that is actually giving us the crosshairs that we want to follow here. You can also go ahead now and arm VNav and LNav. And that'll tell you exactly what you need to be doing in order to follow your flight plan. So you can see here, the crosshair is moving to the right because it wants me to follow this magenta line. We're also coming up to our flaps up speed. So let's go ahead and retract some flaps. And just keep following that magenta line and the magenta crosshair on your PFD. You can hear the plane auto trimming itself as well. Changed the view a little bit just for my the range there. And there we go. We've lined up pretty nicely with our flight plan or our flight path. Now we could probably get rid of all our flaps. So we're just going to go flaps 0. And we want to pitch down a touch. And we are just purely watching our instruments here now. And we can go ahead and lock in our nose gear by clicking it into the lock position or the off position. And you can see our speed is looking good. We're at 200 knots. We're at 4,000 feet. We're climbing nice and healthily, if that's a word. We're climbing nicely. And we're just going to hit a little left here a little bit. Just get back on this magenta line. And what we want to do now is just activate autopilot. So to do so, we'll come over here and hit the command button. And we've got our speed that's been looked after. Our VNav and LNav's looking after everything else. And now we can pretty much take our hands and feet off the controls, and it's going to do everything for us. Now, you know, I mentioned before how you can't be at over 250 knots under 10,000 feet. Well, that's exactly what the plane knows. And that's why it's got a set of 250 speed restraint here. And you can see we're still under 10,000 feet. So what's going to happen is when we get to 10,000 feet, the plane's going to level off a little bit. That'll help us gain some speed. And then it'll continue its climb to our desired altitude, which is 360. So essentially now what you want to do is take in the views of these clouds in Sydney until you get to your cruising altitude. And then you can have a beer or a coffee or whatever you want while you're flying on your way to Melbourne. I'll see you up at the cruising altitude. All right, I've just come back a bit earlier because we've just passed 13,000 feet and you can see our Q&H button has gone yellow. That's to indicate to us that we need to change it from our desired Q&H input, which is 1011, to standard. So to do that, you just want to click the STD button, which has now done it, and it'll say standard, and that's all taken care of. Also, when you do hit 10,000 feet, you can turn off all your lights. So we can go ahead and just switch all of these off, like so. And if you'd like to, you could also turn off your passenger seatbelt signs, but I didn't worry about that before we left. All right, so now all we've got left is the rest of our climb out to 36,000 feet, and I'll catch up with you there. And as you can see, we're now coming to our top of climb, which is about 5 miles away. Now the plane knows that, so once we hit that TC dot, the plane will completely level out. So now all you need to worry about is going downstairs, having some lunch, put the washing out, do some homework, but you must be back in time before top of climb. That is where I'm going to meet you in just a click of a finger. And we're back. Now, if you direct your attention down here, you can see T/D. That means top of descent. So that means when we get to that point, our plane is automatically going to descend because we're on VNav and LNav mode. It's going to automatically descend to whatever altitude that we put into this little section here. Now, for us, we want to go down to 3,000 feet. Okay, so that's our first constraint, and pretty much only constraint in this arrival for today's flight. So we want to go up to our autopilot section up here and change this to 3,000 feet, like so. And that's pretty much ready to go. So once we pass top of descent, the plane is automatically going to descend But if you also wanted to descend on your own accord and tell the plane to do it, you can click this Des button here, click Descend Now, and then Execute. But for this flight, I'm just going to let the plane do it for me, so we can just sit back and monitor that everything's going well. Alrighty, so now that the plane is descending on its own, what we want to do is set up our cockpit for an ILS approach. Now, to do this, we want our chart. Now, today I'm using the Navigraph chart. So I always use Navigraph. I think it's an incredible plugin and an incredible tool. And it's got every chart pretty much for every single airport in the world. All the major ones, at least, especially. Now, to find which chart we need, we want to go to the approach section. Runway 16 ILS is the one that we're running today, but I'm pretty sure we chose ILS Y, so we're going to go ahead and click that. Now, these numbers and digits are the ones that we need to take care of. So the frequency for the ILS is 109.7. So what we want to do is come down to our nav section here and change this so that it says 109.7, and then flick that over to the active frequency. Go back to our chart, and the course was 160, which we want to pop into our course section up here, like so. Now, once we get to an appropriate height or altitude, the plane will catch what's called a localizer and also the glide slope. The localizer will keep the plane on the center of the runway automatically, and the glide slope will guide the plane down from about 3,000 feet until you turn autopilot off, or you might choose to let the plane land automatically. So that 3,000 foot altitude that we put in there is quite important, because at around 3,000 feet, the plane will be able to capture the glide slope and the localizer. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, and I'll see you just before we hit 3,000 feet. All right, so here we are now, just passing 4,300 feet. I'm going to go ahead and hit the approach button and show you guys exactly what that does. You can see on our PFD now that single channel has just popped up, and you can see that colored in diamond magenta that's popped up here. That's your glide slope, and you can see that the localizer is coming alive as well. So we're actually turning automatically onto the final approach course. We're going to go over to our speed and slow us down a touch, go to 170, get some more flaps out. And you'll notice as we come around and complete our turn, we're at the perfect height that we need to be at. You can see the runway ahead of us there. We're a little bit off center, but that's because we're a little bit off center on our localizer as well, which it is fixing automatically. Our lights came on at 10,000 feet. I did that obviously I did that manually, and we can go ahead to our auto brake and just put it to a 2 if we like, just to get some help. And now we're pretty much lined up with the middle of the runway. As you can see, just in front of us there is the runway 16 at Melbourne Airport. Now, all we need to do is monitor our speed, our flaps, and probably deploy the gear very shortly too. I think rule of thumb, or maybe just like a rule period, is by 1,000 feet you want to be fully established and set up for a landing. So we're at 1,500 feet at the moment, and our speed's at 170, and there we are, 1,000 feet, gears down, flaps are at 30, speed's at 160. All right, we're at 600 feet. I'm going to go ahead and turn off autopilot and auto throttle, 400. And I have the aircraft. So we're a bit low here, and that massive headwind is slowing us down a fair bit. So I'm still watching those magenta diamonds on my PFD to try and get an accurate approach. Ooh, wow, it's windy, isn't it? Oh, we got that 747 caught up to us from Sydney. All right, let's get this down. Dang. Look, despite a very shitty landing, we still made it. So that's up to you guys to perfect. And now all you need to do is just taxi to a desired gate of your choice. So for us today, because we're in a Qantas plane, we're going to hit up Charlie 4. I just cannot escape this this UPS 747, can I? All right, let's just cut in front of him. Alrighty, so it looks like Charlie... Okay, so... Alright, we'll just turn right here onto, I believe it's Papa. And... Is Charlie 4 available? No, I don't think it is. So we're just going to go to, I believe it's Charlie 6 or Charlie 8 here on my left. Yeah, this will be Charlie 8. So we'll then just taxi on out to Charlie 8. And what you can do now as well is save a bit of time, and so you can turn your engines off, is just restart the APU quickly. That'll take some time to start up again. And that means you'll be able to turn off your engines when you're at the bay without it actually, without the plane turning off. And watch our nose guidance system at the top there, you can see. And stop, there we go. Okay, so parking brake can come up. APU is can be switched over now. We'll do that right now. Turn off our engines, and we can turn off our beacon lights. The aero bridge is coming on, the stairs are coming on, and all the passengers can safely disembark. That's pretty much typical of how I would do a full flight. So if it works for me, it should work for you. Now, I hope this can help just at least one person. And if it does, please let me know in the comments below. And if there's any other tutorials or help that you guys need with Flight Simulator, let me know in the comments below as well. Now, good luck, go out there, and happy flying.